not necessarily because I believe that it's highly scientific in terms of sports science and research, but because I felt that when I entered this area, this arena of sports science and studies, and started to work for this university, I realized that there is a big gap between people who come from sports and make it to second career managerial positions at federations and have wonderful skills in sports, but they don't necessarily have those skills that they require or that others require of them to be successful in their second career. So we established a project with my colleagues, Bernadette Galdi and Renata Kosaras. And so you will see some of the outcomes of this project here. And I'm more than happy to discuss the details of the research part as well as the pragmatics. It's a very pragmatic area. So if you don't mind, I would share. Hopefully I can find my presentation. What kind of skill set is there available for sportsmen and what are the skills that they can bring from sports into second career. But we also made sure that we understand the value of those skills that they bring from sports. So the areas where we figured out that we need to help people is sports associations, federations, sports industry companies, clubs, GOs, and NGOs, including, for instance, the Foreign Ministry of Trade, where sports in Hungary is a high priority. And we have very many people who are professional athletes. They are very good, but when they enter this arena of international negotiations, meetings, and sports events, mega sports events, they have a lot of trouble and they have a lot of challenges. So basically, international communication and business life poses a whole big array of new skills that need to be developed, such as communication, marketing, international relations, protocol, event management, sports law, and sports management. And so what we can see, and you can see, I'm sure too, on your side, is that people do it by learning by doing, which is they observe others who are successful and they test and try and fail and then retry certain, situations. Then there are traditional trainings and training programs and courses available. I wonder how many people go to sports management programs and other programs on communications these days that are full-time programs. And there are some modern forms of training, such as through the internet, you can, join some of these workshops where you can train yourself. But the question is, do professional athletes feel the need to start improving themselves even before stopping their sporting career and moving on to the second career? So self-education and consciousness about the skill set is a key to their success in the future, in their career, second career. And what I'm kind of focusing on today is how a very interesting combination of trainings, coaching, consulting, and mentoring can help these people. Because what we see just today, for instance, Renata gave me a call and said, hey, you know what, I'm rushing to visit one of the national federations. They are going to have a media event, a press conference on Saturday, and I need to prepare them because there have been a crisis situation recently and they don't know how to communicate it. And they might run into media kind of challenges and trouble if I don't help. So people actually recognize that it's not enough to be a good sportsman and to be, for instance, an Olympic champion. If in the second career, you need a totally different kind of skill set to cope with and to use.
Judith, I'm sorry, I already shared your presentation. Can you just,
I'm at the fourth.
Tell me which slide should I?
Number 4.
Okay. Can you see your presentation as well?
I can, yeah.
Is it the right slide or should I go ahead?
This is the right slide, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This is like 6 pictures, situations, challenges, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the left side, thank you so much for the help. On the left side, you can see people who are individual sportsmen or team sportsmen. As you duly know, individual sports provide not only the stamina and perfect timing and a lot of skills that are related to get focused and activate your energy level and performance at the highest peak for a particular moment, but it also makes sure that you have the stamina to get up from scratch, even in post-traumatic situations, and get on the go and solve situations on your own. Whereas in team sports, people also learn how to collaborate and how to help each other, how to delegate certain jobs, which are essential skills in management. So there is even a difference that we analyzed with my colleagues between individual and team sports people. But when they end up in international negotiations, they work for national Olympic committees, or they work for advocate for sports clubs or federations, or they simply have to give a press interview or appear on the in the media, then they are sometimes really, really helpless because they feel that their sports results and performance made them famous and well-known and respected, but are they able to meet up the requirements of millennial generation quest for, for information and visuals? So if you, Gregory, help me moving on to the next slide. Slide 5, thank you. This is about the types of competencies that we have analyzed. And as you can see, there are 3 big groups: the so-called generic competencies, the managerial competencies, and the functional technical competencies. And now we are getting focused on managerial positions. So obviously, for everybody, this is kind of a common sense that we need communication and good communication skills. But sometimes what I observe with sportsmen is that they don't get or don't necessarily understand the difference between formal language of the meetings, formal way of writing a letter or giving an interview, and less formal ways that they got used to in sports. So the language registers make a big difference and they don't necessarily get it. In the middle, you can see the managerial competencies, and especially with people who make it to, for instance, a former Olympic champion swimmer has just received a week or 2 weeks ago a position as an ambassador for Hungary. He's a wonderful person, very successful sports diplomat. Does he have, for instance, organizing skills, cross-cultural perspective, planning, execution, analytical skills, decision-making, delegation, and leadership? So what we suggest is that the best way to help a person is that before he or she ends his or her career, we should have a SWOT analysis or any kind of evaluation of the skill set that the person has before she or he would move on to another career. To give you another example, Hedvig Karakas is a judo champion, and she used to study and be my student and write a thesis on sports diplomacy with me. And she is a wonderful person, and now she has just started her work for the International Judo Federation. Is she happy with the skills she has? Is she able to convey everything on a daily basis? How about her functional competencies, such as business skills, technical skills to launch and convey a meeting? Successfully, she learned, for instance, those negotiation skills at the university, but many people do not have those improved. Gregory, if you move on to the next slide, you can see here 2 lists. One is a short list of the fundamental competencies that people need in sports diplomacy and sports business negotiations, such as diplomatic skills, or, for instance, empathy, strategic thinking. And for instance, some like strategic thinking might come from sports easily because, you know, athletes, professionals have to have a strategic thinking, but more, I would say their coaches might have strategic thinking. And for sportsmen, it's more like the tactics and less the strategy. Sense of responsibility and taking advocacy for, you know, organizations, that's a new area where they need to develop their skills. And last but not least, the so-called auxiliary competencies are, some of them are here, the skills that we need to improve if, for instance, that person wants to serve an international federation. Coping ability with challenges beyond sports, such as international business challenges or diplomatic challenges and conflicts. And now we are just in the middle of some of the major sports events where big question is, should federations take a position against Russian players to be involved or not in view of the war? So how do you cope with those difficult situations if you haven't learned how to negotiate and how to make statements in a responsible way? Moving on to the next slide, where you can see some methods. There is a wonderful new article that appeared by one of my colleagues, actually two of my colleagues, Professor Gatesy and his doctoral students, Yekaterina Glebova and Ms. Zareb, created a career path in sports management trends, typology, and trajectories article that actually takes a new view on some of the skills required. And we have some thesis written for sports diplomacy that I helped, where we also analyze those. So as you can see, sports diplomacy and communication studies moves towards these new avenues in research and try to measure some of the skills that seem to be unmeasurable before. I think I would not necessarily detail all those, just mention you that competence mapping is the key to developing and supporting sportsmen. Now, in the next two slides, the statement is that communication is essential. Communication is essential, and if any of the sportsmen believes that, you know, I'm simply not interested too much, I'm not the type, my personality is too introvert, it's too bad, because taking a new position will give you a pain every second day, probably. So with my colleagues, what we do is we create this map for not only sportsmen, but also for sports organizations. And we have some recommendations how to improve the skills. And then I will give you in a minute some specific examples. I think we can move on to the next slide on the expected results. So, for instance, when we train these people, some of the topics and questions that we discuss with them is, how do they see, for instance, the media? And how do they see social media? And we want them to, and we ask them to look into the mirror and what is their projected image in the social media? Is it very conflictual, very too much, for instance, too much of their private life exposed? Or is it very specifically focused on their new career paths? How conscious are they about social media use? How conscious are they about their body language when they give an interview? For instance, how do they actually conduct interviews on TV, in say radio or other platforms? And how do they create, for instance, how do they make sure that they have sponsors or they develop their self-branding? That's another big array of questions. So the next slide gives you a funny picture on the right. Gregory, if you move on to the next one, then I think what you see on the right is really the less scientific approach of any kind of a high achievers way of entering the second career. What you see is the former athletes' major Olympic or World Championship results. And for some years, that is a value, that's an asset. And that asset can be turned into some practical use and even financial use for the athlete. But what you don't see is all the work that that person has done to achieve that success. So my question today is, if you know how much passion, work, courage, stamina, diligence, industry, pain, fear, joy, and everything goes into a sport result, then why do we expect people to leap over to the next phase without knowing that the next phase of their career needs the same kind of courage, planning, vision, patience, hard work, stamina, industry, and everything else? So what I'm kind of arguing for is that people need to know that these are the blocks and you know, the bricks that build the wall of your new career path. I think I would just quickly touch upon the communication skills and do not necessarily detail those in the next slide. You can see, obviously, you know, there are verbal and nonverbal skills, but sometimes, for instance, we need to make the sportsman aware that the tone of their first voice, their facial expression is very important, and it makes a big difference and can alter the outcome of their performance. If they are not aware of cultural differences in a negotiation, then they can be as successful as possible in sports, but in their second career, you know, it's not going to work out. If their appearance is still sporty instead of business casual, if their way of, you know, addressing people is not formal and nice enough, then they can be they can start to live on their previous career success, but it's not going to work out well. Gregory, if you don't mind, I would move on to the slide 13, the next two from, yes, results. So this is what I would like to have as a wrap up of some of the ideas that I had with you. So first of all, what we do in this project is we group some of the skills that we observe with the athletes. And we also take into consideration individual variables, for instance, like a previous injury or some kind, or for instance, COVID 2 years off, or the war situation, or any kind of an additional feature that makes it specific of that person. And then we also consider the organizational assets, like what is the exact existing asset of the organization that person is working for or will work for. And then we try also to indicate that there are advantages and disadvantages of just learning by doing and trying to follow previous patterns, because we believe that today all these people need brand new skills that, for instance, social media related skills that were not really necessary for anyone. Just to mention, for instance, Mr. Schmidt, who is the key sports diplomatic person in Hungary with a major career in sports and in diplomacy. I believe that if he started his career today, he would also need major media skills that are totally different from the ones that he used to have and make successful. So on the next slide, you can see a list of possibilities for sportsmen, starting from experimental learning and self-education through training, consultancy, and coaching, mentoring. Next slide, Gregory, please. Okay, so this is an integrated platform of learning that we suggest for sportsmen and for also organizations. And this integrated platform is very complex. It's multidisciplinary and it's pragmatic. and it's problem-solving based, certainly. So as a conclusion, on the last slide, last but not least, you can see that the second career of athletes is our focus, or was our focus for the research and this project. And we would like to provide assistance at operative and policy levels too. We make policy level recommendations for the Sports Diplomacy Department of the Foreign Ministry of Trade and Commerce. And we also help not only organizations, but individual sportsmen in their endeavor to become really, really professional. So the last two slides, I'm not going to detail, just kind of quickly indicate that we are to launch a sports diplomacy program in English, which is a hybrid program. And so whoever is interested, that's available hopefully from this September on. And this is from people from sports in international relations, and also anyone who works for sport organizations in international arenas. So this is what I'm working on. And the last one is another new project, which is entitled Soft Skills for Success. And this is organization specific. So we go and help organizations to improve the skill sets that their employees have. I thank you for your attention, and I'm kind of apologizing for the technical issues. And let me know if anyone is interested in those. We can send more details, but the point is that we try to help sports from communication studies and other skill sets. Thank you.